Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today in this video, I am going to be discussing my entire historical mystery TBR part 2. In this video, I am going to be talking about all the Victorian, Edwardian, and 1920s or 30s historical mysteries on my TBR shelf to get your thoughts about which ones you think sound interesting and would like me to read first. If you want to see all of my ancient, medieval, and Georgian/Regency historical mystery TBR picks, then you can watch part 1, which I will link in the card up above. Once again, I am not including any series I already started in these videos because the main reason I'm making these is to get some suggestions about which books or series I should make a priority and start next, since there are so many historical mystery series out there and I don't want to be reading 40 different series at once. With that being said, let's just dive right into it with my Victorian historical mysteries. Victorian/Gilded Age mysteries, I believe, is the largest category out of all of them, which is not super surprising to me because I feel like if you're gonna write a historical mystery, the Victorian times, it makes a lot of sense to choose that setting because that is the era where Scotland Yard was first created. We had Jack the Ripper. People were starting to understand a little more about crime scenes and the psychology of killers. Also, the Victorian era was just so long that there are so many different decades you can choose from. Now, the first mystery series on this list, I actually realized I should have included it with the Georgian/Regency mysteries because technically when this first book is set, Victoria was not the queen yet, so it's not technically the Victorian era, but I believe later books in the series take place after she's come to the throne, so it's sort of straddling the line between the two eras. So the first books I want to talk about are the Lady Keira Darby mysteries by Anna Lee Huber. The first book is called The Anatomist's Wife, and the first book takes place in Scotland in the year 1830. The main character, Lady Keira Darby, has recently been widowed, and her deceased husband was very interested in human anatomy, and so through him she's become very knowledgeable about the subject, something which is not necessarily considered a proper interest for a lady in this period, but when a murder takes place at her sister's house party, Lady Darby begins to investigate with the help of the infuriating inquiry agent. What's his name? I forget. Sebastian Gage. His name is Sebastian Gage, and an inquiry agent is basically an antiquated term for a private detective. Now, this is one of the most popular historical mystery series out there. When I was looking for series to add to my TBR, so many people were like, oh my god, these books are fantastic, you gotta read them. To be completely honest with you, I read the first chapter for that Try a Chapter Historical Mysteries video that I did, and I did not like it. I did not like the first chapter at all. It picks up when the murder has just happened, which in theory sounds really exciting and like a great way to start a story, but to me, I couldn't connect with anything that was happening because all of these names and people were being thrown at me, and I didn't know who any of these people were. I think it would have been better to introduce the character of Lady Keira Darby first to let me know a little bit about her and get invested in her before we drop right into the main plot of the novel. So the way the first chapter was written did not work for me at all, but considering these books are so popular, I might want to still give the first book a try. Next up, another series that I featured in that Try a Chapter video, the Lady Emily Ashton mysteries by Wow, I can't talk today. By Tasha Alexander. The first book is called And Only to Deceive. These books take place in early Victorian times, though I could not find any year listed in the Goodreads description or in the reviews, so I'm not sure what exact year these books are set. The main character, Lady Emily Ashton, is this very intelligent Victorian woman. She was married to the Viscount Ashton, however he died not long after their marriage, and in this first book she discovers new information about her late husband, including that he actually really deeply loved her and she never knew. She begins getting involved in some of the mysterious affairs he was involved in before his death. This series takes place in multiple different countries, not just England. I believe there are books set in Greece, Florence, and Venice, among other places. Looking on Goodreads, there are 16 books in this series, as well as several novellas, including some Christmas-themed novellas, and these books do take place in many different locations, including various locations in England. Then book 4 takes place in Turkey, book 5, Normandy, France, book 7 is in Venice, book 10 takes place in the French Riviera, book 11 takes place in Santorini, Greece. Book 12 takes place in St. Petersburg, Russia. Book 14 takes place in Pompeii. Book 15 takes place in Florence, Italy. And the most recent book, book 16, takes place in Egypt. I do think it's really interesting that the series takes place in so many different countries. I think that's really cool, and I would be interested to check these out. Next, I have the Lady Julia Grey mysteries by Deanna Raybourn. These books also take place in the Victorian era, though I could not find a specific year listed on Goodreads. This series includes 5 novels and also several novellas. When you look up the series on Goodreads, the little description at the top says, "Starting with her husband's sudden death, Lady Julia Grey is swept into a world of mystery and deceit. It is also the world of the enigmatic and maddeningly attractive private investigator Nicholas Brisbane, ... And it has the first line from the first book, which I think is really funny. "To say that I met Nicholas Brisbane over my husband's dead body is not entirely accurate. Edward, it should be noted, was still twitching on the floor." I think that's really funny. I love Deanna Raybourn's Veronica Speedwell mysteries. This is a much shorter series with, like I said, only 5 main books. I believe that Deanna Raybourn switched publishers after writing the Lady Julia Grey mysteries and then started writing Veronica Speedwell with her new publisher. I would like to check these out. I think I would really like them. I have heard that they are thematically a lot darker than the Veronica Speedwell mysteries, which keep things generally pretty light and fun, but since I enjoy this author, I definitely want to check out these books. I also realized all 3 of the series we've talked about so far follow a main character who is a lady and a widow, which is kind of interesting. I guess, though, that kind of makes sense because if you're writing in the Victorian era where women didn't have the same freedoms as men, being a widow does give a woman a certain amount of status and freedom of movement that a single woman wouldn't have. Next up, I have the Avery and Blake series by M.J. Carter. The first book is called The Strangler Vine, and this series is set in 1837 Calcutta. This series is another short one. It only has 3 books, and it follows William Avery, a down-at-heel junior officer in the Army of the East India Company, who is enlisted in the first book to find a missing man. In his quest, he is joined by the enigmatic and uncouth Jeremiah Blake. Then we have Still Life with Murder, the first Nell Sweeney mystery by P.B. Ryan. This first book is set in 1868. The first book takes place in Gilded Age Boston, and Nell Sweeney is working as a governess for the wealthy Hewitt family. A few years ago, their son William was believed to have died in a Confederate prison camp. However, they find out that he is still alive, but in prison for having murdered a man while high on opium. Mr. Hewitt says they just need to cut William off. He is a lost cause. Forget about him. But Mrs. Hewitt does not want to give up on her son so easily, so she enlists Nell's help in finding out the truth. This series has 6 books in it, and it says on Goodreads, if you like twisty-turny mysteries with a breathless whisper of romantic tension, you've come to the right place. I do like twisty-turny mysteries with a breathless whisper of romantic tension. That sounds perfect. Next, the Cat Holloway Mysteries by Jennifer Ashley. These books take place in 1880s Victorian London, and the main character, Cat Holloway, is a cook at the Mayfair mansion of the wealthy Lord Rankin. In the first book, Kat's assistant is murdered, so she is determined to get to the bottom of the crime. This series includes 6 novels and a few short stories or novellas. The most recent book was published in 2022, so there might be more coming. Multiple Goodreads reviews describe this series as having a Downton Abbey flair, and Downton Abbey is my favorite TV show, so a Victorian upstairs, downstairs murder mystery series with Downton Abbey vibes. I'm up for it. Next, I have one of, if not the most popular historical mystery series, the Amelia Peabody Mysteries by Elizabeth Peters. The first book takes place in 1880 in Egypt. This series includes 20 novels. Yes. 20. The first book takes place in 1880 and the last book takes place in 1912, so the series covers a significant portion of time. The main character, Amelia Peabody, is a Victorian adventuress. I believe in the first book she is considered a spinster, but she is married in most of the series, and her husband is her partner in solving crimes at the archaeological digs they visit in Egypt. This series is so popular. The first book was published way back in the 1970s, and I've just heard nothing but praise for these books, so I do really want to read them. Next, I have a standalone novel, The Graves of Whitechapel by Claire Evans. I believe I saw this book on somebody's Bookstagram account and added it to my TBR. I don't really remember what it's about, so I'm just gonna read the Goodreads description to you. Victorian London, 1882. 5 years ago, crusading lawyer Cage Lackman successfully defended Moses Pickering against a charge of murder. Now, a body is found bearing all the disturbing hallmarks of that victim, and Pickering is missing. Did Cage free a brutal murderer? Cage's reputation is in tatters, and worse, he is implicated in this new murder by the bitter detective who led the first failed case. Left with no other alternative, Cage must find Pickering to prove his innocence. His increasingly desperate search takes him back to the past, to a woman he never thought to see again, and down into a warren of lies and betrayals concealed beneath Holland Park mansions and the mean streets of Whitechapel, where a murderer, heartbreak, and revenge lie in wait. This is a standalone, so it's not going to be the same level of commitment as some of these very long series. I will have to buy a copy though, because my library does not have it, but something to consider. I also think the cover of this book looks very pretty. I love the design. Next, I have the Lady Sherlock series by Sherry Thomas. The first book is called A Study in Scarlet Women. This is a series set in Victorian London where the main character is a female version of Sherlock Holmes. With her inquisitive mind, Charlotte Holmes has never felt comfortable with the demureness expected of the fairer sex in upper-class society. But even she never thought that she would become a social pariah, an outcast fending for herself on the mean streets of London. When the city is struck by a trio of unexpected deaths and suspicion falls on her sister and father, Charlotte is desperate to find the true culprits and clear the family name. She'll have help from friends new and old, a kind-hearted widow, a police inspector, and a man who has long loved her. But in the end, it will be up to Charlotte, under the assumed name Sherlock Holmes, to challenge society's expectations and match wits against an unseen mastermind. This series currently includes 6 novels, 1 short story, with a 7th novel coming out in 2023. I find the concept of Sherlock Holmes being reimagined with a female main character really interesting, so this one is on my radar for sure. Next, I have The Strings of Murder, the first Frey and Maigret novel by Oscar de Muriel. Actually, I believe it's pronounced Fry? But I want to say Frey because I like that better and I kind of like how they rhyme. I think that might be wrong though. The first book takes place in 1888 Edinburgh when a violin virtuoso is murdered. Inspector Ian Fry of Scotland Yard is sent to aid in the murder investigation. He is forced to partner up with Detective Maigret of the Edinburgh police force to solve the murder. This series includes 7 novels and 2 other novellas, I believe. And the 7th book, which was just published this year, is the final one, so this series is now complete. It's described on Goodreads as having a gothic atmosphere and being great for fans of Sherlock Holmes and Edgar Allan Poe, so sounds pretty good to me. Next, another massive historical mystery series, the Gaslight Mysteries by Victoria Thompson. The first book is called Murder on Astor Place. This series includes 26 books. 26 books, and it says that the 26th is coming out in 2023, so it might not even be over yet. There might be who knows how many books in this series by the end of it. These books take place in turn-of-the-century New York City and follow Sergeant Frank Malloy, who teams up with midwife Sarah Brandt to solve a murder. I believe that over the course of the series, these two develop a romantic relationship, and I love a historical mystery with a romantic storyline. Just, who knew solving crimes could be so romantic, you know? I do think I could end up really liking this, and the main female character being a midwife interests me. However, the fact that the series is so long scares me. I'm very intimidated by it. Next, I have the Captain Jim Aganotri series by Neve March. The first book is called Murder in Old Bombay, and it takes place in 1892 in British colonial India. So far, there are only 2 books. I do not know if there will be more. I added these to my TBR after I randomly saw the books one day in Barnes & Noble. The main character, Captain Jim Aganotri, is a big fan of Sherlock Holmes, and so when murders take place in Bombay, he is on the case. I believe these books also do include a romantic component based on the description for the first book. It seems like there is a love interest, so I think these could be pretty interesting. I have never read a book set in Bombay before, but I do have a few India set mysteries on this TBR, all of which seem really interesting. And last in this category, oh my god, I feel like I've been talking about Victorian Gilded Age mysteries for an hour. I feel like this has just kept going on and on and on. But the last book in this category is Murder at the Breakers, the first Gilded Newport mystery by Alyssa Maxwell. I added this to my TBR because literally the first line of the description is, for fans of HBO's The Gilded Age. And I loved The Gilded Age. So take The Gilded Age and make it a murder mystery. I'm there. This series includes 10 novels following female reporter Emma Cross, and the most recent book was published in 2022, so perhaps there will be more books coming in the series. I did really love The Gilded Age, so a Gilded Age historical mystery series sounds very interesting. Finally, we have reached the Edwardian mysteries. Now, I am using the term Edwardian a little loosely here. Basically, this category, I am just including all of the books that take place after Queen Victoria's death, but before 1920. So the first series in this category is going to be the Stella and Lindy Mysteries by Clara McKenna. The first book is called Murder at Morrington Hall, and it takes place in 1905. American heiress Stella Kendrick travels to England with her father, and she finds out that her father has arranged a marriage for her to the Viscount Lyndhurst. Is that his name? Yes, the Viscount Lyndhurst, nicknamed Lindy. Originally, Stella is not happy about this engagement at all, but when the vicar who is supposed to marry them turns up dead, Stella and Lindy end up trying to solve the crime together, and I think the two of them will discover over the course of their investigation that maybe they actually are a good match after all. There are 4 books in this series so far, and the most recent book, which was published this year, takes place in York. As I mentioned in my previous video, I am planning to take a trip to York in 2023, so the concept of a murder mystery set there is very intriguing to me. I think this could be a great series for me. As I said, I love a historical mystery with a strong romantic component, so I hope I like these. Next, I have A Deadly Affection, the first Dr. Genevieve Summerford mystery by Kyler Overholt. I'm not sure if I am pronouncing their name right. This first book takes place in 1907 New York, following one of New York's only female psychologists, Dr. Genevieve Summerford. When one of her patients is suspected of murder, Genevieve feels responsible, and so she takes it upon herself to solve the case and find the true killer. This seems to only be a duology. The last book was published in 2017, so again, not as much of a commitment as these 20+ series. Next, I have A Quiet Life in the Country, the first Lady Hardcastle mystery by T.E. Kinsey. I didn't know if I was going to like these or not because they look to be a little more on the cozy mystery side, but everybody on BookTube just raves about these books, so I want to check them out for myself and see if I like them. The first book takes place in 1908, and Lady Emily Hardcastle and her maid Florence leave London behind for a quiet life in the country. I believe the two of them used to be investigators or spies, so they're hoping to live a quiet life, but it turns out that this seemingly idyllic country village they've moved to has an unusually high number of murders. This series has 9 books so far. I'm not sure if there will be more to come, but everybody just raves about these books and talks about how delightful they are. So I guess that means I have to check them out and see what the hype is about. Next, I have Singapore Sapphire, the first Harriet Gordon mystery by A.M. Stewart. This book takes place in 1910 in colonial Singapore. It follows Harriet Gordon, who has just moved there to escape her traumatic past. She advertises her services as a secretary, but it turns out that the man who hired her has just been found murdered. So Harriet teams up with Inspector Robert Curran to find out who killed her employer. The fourth and final book in this series has not come out yet, so again, this is a nice, short historical mystery series, and I added this to my TBR because I have never read a book set in Singapore before, and it just sounds really interesting, so definitely want to check these out. Now here's another series that I just added to my TBR after stumbling across one of the books at Barnes & Noble, the Jane Prescott series by Mariah Fredericks. The first book is called A Death of No Importance. These books take place in 1910 in New York City, and they follow maid Jane Prescott. As a maid, Jane is someone that the wealthy members of society she serves don't think twice about, and so she is able to use her invisibility to her benefit to solve crimes. The fourth book came out in 2021, and I don't know if there are going to be more, but this could be a good series. Again, it's described as having a upstairs, downstairs vibe, which I'm very into. Next, I have the Bess Crawford series by Charles Todd. The first book is called A Duty to the Dead. The main character, Bess Crawford, is a World War I nurse. I know Charles Todd is a very popular historical mystery author. Don't know much about his books, but I added this one to my TBR because I like that it has a female main character. According to Goodreads, this series has 13 primary works and 18 total works, with the latest book scheduled to come out in 2023. If you've read any of these, do let me know what you thought of them in the comments. And last in this category, I have the Mitford Murders by Jessica Fellowes. This is the first in a series, and yes, before you ask, Jessica Fellowes is related to Julian Fellowes, the creator of Downton Abbey and The Gilded Age. She is, I believe, his niece. The main character, Louisa Cannon, is a maid to the Mitford family in 1919, and when a murder takes place, she takes it upon herself to investigate. Again, another series that seems to have that above stairs, below stairs thing going on. The sixth and final book in this series came out in 2022. The first book does not have a very high Goodreads rating. However, I have seen some booktubers say they really enjoy these books, so I'm definitely willing to give them a shot. Now, finally, the 1920s and 30s set mysteries. The first in this category is The Bangalore Detectives Club by Harini Nagarenda, the first Kaveri and Ramu story. This series is set in the 1920s, and it follows sari-wearing detective Kaveri and her husband Ramu. There is only one book out so far. The first book, The Bangalore Detectives Club, was just published in 2022, and the second book, Murder Under a Red Moon, is coming out in 2023. Then, directly after that, we have another book set in 1920s India, The Widows of Malabar Hill, the first Perveen mystery series by Sujata Massey. This book takes place in Bombay in 1921, and the series follows Perveen Mystery, who is the first female lawyer in Bombay. This series includes 4 novels and 1 short story or novella so far. This series has been on my TBR for a few years now, and I've almost put it on one of my Scrabble TBRs a couple of times, so I really want to finally give this series a try. Next, I have A Botanist's Guide to Parties and Poisons, the first Saffron Everly mystery by Kate Kavari. This book takes place in London in 1923, and the description describes it as perfect for fans of Deanna Raybourn and Anna Lee Huber. Saffron Everly is a research assistant at the University College of London, but when a murder takes place and her mentor is suspected, she takes it upon herself to clear his name. She is aided by the enigmatic Alexander Ashton, a fellow researcher. That's at least the 3rd time that one of these descriptions has used the word enigmatic today. This is a recent release. The first book just came out this year, and book 2 is expected in 2023. I don't know about this one. The first book has a pretty low Goodreads rating, but since it is a new series, maybe I'll give it a shot. Next, Last Call at the Nightingale by Catherine Shellman, the first of the Nightingale mysteries. This book takes place in New York City in 1924 at an illegal underground club called the Nightingale, where a murder takes place. This is another brand new series. The first book just came out in 2022, and book 2 is coming next year. So if you have read these, do let me know what you thought of them. Or this one, because only one's come out. I can't talk today, guys. I'm really struggling here. And finally, we have a book that I added to my TBR just this week. Murder at Mallowan Hall by Colleen Cambridge. This is the first Phillida Bright mystery. It takes place in the year 1930 at the estate of Max Mallowan and his wife, Agatha Christie. This was her second husband, and the main character in this series is their housekeeper, Phillida Bright, who finds herself having to solve crimes that feel like they came just out of her mistress's novels. As a big Agatha Christie fan, this concept sounds very intriguing to me. The first book, Murder at Mallowan Hall, came out in 2021, and book 2, A Trace of Poison, came out this year. Oh my god, I feel like I've been talking for an eternity. Am I even making sense at this point? But guys, we did it. We went through my entire historical mystery TBR. I know, it just felt like it was gonna go on forever, but we did it, and now what I need from you is go into the comments and tell me which of these books sound the most interesting to you. Are there any that you've read and really liked? Are there any that you've read and hated? Let me know so I know which books to prioritize in the future. If you are still watching at the end of this long-ass video, how about you comment a sparkle emoji down below? Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. My social media links are down below if you want to follow me on Tumblr, Instagram, or be my friend on Goodreads. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Bye, and I'll see you next time.